Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something slower than that ancient pot of broth simmering somewhere in the mist of old Hanoi. You're here and you're listening, which already makes you braver than most, because trust me, if you were actually standing where I'm about to take you, breathing in that heavy steam, you'd probably pass out from hunger. Before the story even started, you wouldn't survive. You'd fold like soggy noodles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment. Where are you listening from and what time is it for you? It's strangely comforting to know someone out there is awake at the same weird hour as you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward, well, not literally, but in your mind. There's a soft crunch under your feet like old gravel in a narrow alley. The air is wet, damp in that way only old cities can hold it, and there's the smell. Oh, that smell. Not just food, but warmth, human warmth, like laughter wrapped in steam. You hear a faint hiss, something bubbling, something that's been bubbling for hours, maybe days. You lean closer, and I'm whispering now, so you don't scare it away. Yes, scare it, because this story breathes. It has lungs of smoke and spice. The first bowls of pho were not made for tourists or Instagram or whatever you're scrolling through at 3 in the morning. They were born out of necessity, poverty, and if we're being brutally honest, boredom with eating the same boiled buffalo every single day. You picture it, a pot blackened by firewood, balanced on 3 stones. It's 1890 something. Don't bother asking me the exact year. Historians are still yelling at each other about that. Some say it was closer to 1900, some insist it was decades earlier, but let them argue. You're just here for the smell, aren't you? The broth wasn't magic at first, it was just broth. Someone, maybe a woman in a conical hat, maybe a grumpy old man who thought everything tasted better with more salt, dropped a bone in boiling water. Not just any bone. Cow bones, the ones the French weren't interested in eating. Funny, right? The French devoured the fancy cuts, left the scraps behind, and the Vietnamese, resourceful as always, turned leftovers into legends. You hear that faint gurgling now, don't you? Close your eyes and you're crouched near that pot. The steam hits your face, and it's a little like opening the dishwasher mid-cycle. Except it smells like an entire cow just walked through a field of cinnamon and star anise. But that didn't happen overnight, no. The first attempts were clumsy, bland. People chewed it, frowned, and muttered things like, tastes like hot water with regret. That's your first ASMR fact of the night. Early pho was boring. Can you imagine? A bowl of watery soup, a couple of noodles, and meat so tough you could use it as shoe leather. Still, you'd eat it, because back then it was better than nothing. You sit there in that tiny street corner, listening to the low murmur of voices. Men squatting on low wooden stools, women in long, worn-out, tooth-unladling broth with hands that smelled of smoke. You feel the night pressing in, lantern light flickers, shadows bending and stretching like they have secrets of their own. A little girl giggles nearby, maybe because she sees you staring too long at that pot. She knows something you don't. She knows that this soup will change, that one day people will fly across oceans just to eat it. But for now, you're stuck in this moment, and the broth is just learning. Here's something you won't find in those shiny food documentaries. Some of the earliest pho sellers were rumored to add a handful of dried shrimp shells to the pot, not because it tasted good, but because they believed it made the broth sing overnight. Silly? Sure. But maybe you'd do the same if you were hoping to feed half the street with just 2 bones and a prayer. You shift slightly. Your knees ache from crouching. It's quiet now except for the bubbling. Imagine counting each bubble. It's hypnotic, isn't it? You think about your own life for a second, about how slow things feel, how nothing seems to change fast enough. But then you smell that broth getting richer, darker, deeper. Change takes time. Pho took decades to become what you know. Well, you can wait a little too. The steam curls around your face again, thicker this time as if the pot knows you're watching. You breathe it in, and your stomach growls so loudly you almost laugh. The man next to you glances over. You look away quickly, pretending to be fascinated by the cracks in the wooden stool. He slurps his bowl loudly. Slurping wasn't rude back then. It was like applause. If you slurped, it meant the cook was doing something right. You want to slurp too, but you don't have a bowl. Not yet. Be patient. Be patient. Tonight, you're just here to listen, to feel this beginning. And somewhere behind all this steam, the story waits to unfold one bubble at a time. You stay crouched. Your legs already numb, but you can't leave. The steam hooks you, pulls you in like some cheap magician whispering, "One more trick, just one more." And you're weak enough to listen. The smell is changing now. It's heavier, richer. Someone just tossed another bone into the pot and it lands with a dull splash that makes you flinch. The vendor doesn't notice. He's too busy scraping something off the bone with a knife so dull you can almost feel how many years it's been grinding against the same wooden cutting board. And here's where it gets, well, weird. You've been told all your life that pho is beef, pure beef. But right now, in this alley, that's not true. The man is muttering to himself, something about how the French are crazy, how they eat the best cuts of cow but toss out parts too chewy for their soft teeth. Vietnamese cooks, though, they were scavengers with genius hands. The first people to taste this new broth weren't delighted. Oh no, they were suspicious. Beef wasn't exactly normal. Before this, most folks ate pork or chicken, sometimes buffalo if they had the money or the courage to chase one. Cows were for plowing, not eating. You wouldn't look at a tractor and think, dinner, same vibe. So imagine that first bite. You lift the chopsticks in your mind. Don't worry, I'll hold them for you. Your hands are shaking too much from anticipation, and you drag a strip of beef through the hot broth. It's tough, fibrous, almost fighting you back. People chewed for minutes, jaws working like rusty door hinges, and some spat it out entirely. One old man reportedly yelled, "It tastes like rope soaked in tea." But there was something, a whisper of richness, a promise buried under the roughness. And that's where the magic began, because while everyone mocked the taste, a few curious cooks started experimenting. Here's a secret no one brags about. Those first beef broths weren't clear and elegant like the pho you know. They were cloudy, greasy, with globs of fat bobbing on the surface like tiny pale islands. But that fat, that was flavor, and for poor workers who've been eating watery rice porridge their whole lives, it was heaven. You smell it now. Close your eyes and feel the way it clings to your nostrils, how it leaves a slickness on your tongue even though you haven't swallowed anything. And your stomach, yeah, it growls again, louder than last time. The man next to you smirks. Want another odd fact? Some of the earliest pho sellers mixed buffalo meat with beef to soften the flavor. It didn't work. It made the broth taste like someone cooked an old leather boot with herbs. But they tried, and trying is what kept the pot bubbling night after night. The vendors were relentless. They boiled bones for hours, sometimes overnight, throwing in whatever they could get. Onions charred black, slices of ginger burned until they smelled like campfire. Even a pinch of cinnamon stolen from spice merchants who never imagined it would end up in soup. Historians still argue about whether beef pho was born entirely from French influence or whether some stubborn Vietnamese cook just decided one day to rebel against tradition. Honestly, it doesn't matter right now as you sit there in that damp alley. History is thick in the air, like the steam curling into your hair. The vendor lifts the lid of the pot and you hear it. Soft, wet, almost like breathing. The broth exhales and you swear it sighs, finally getting there. You lean closer, hypnotized, and you can't help but laugh a little at yourself, sitting here in your mind drooling over a broth that people once hated. But that's the thing, right? The start of anything good always looks unimpressive. It's like staring at a half-built house or, I don't know, trying to enjoy a TV show before the plot gets interesting. But you stay, because you know, even if they don't, this is the moment the magic begins to form. Quietly, stubbornly, like a secret only you're allowed to hear, the vendor throws another bone in. The pot bubbles harder, almost impatient, and you... well, you're not going anywhere. The night stretches around you, thick and velvety, and you're still crouched there, because what else could possibly matter more than this slow alchemy happening right in front of you? The pot groans again, louder this time, as if it knows it's about to step into history, or at least argue with it. And yes, argue is the right word, because here's the funny thing. No one can agree on where pho truly came from. You'd think a soup would just be a soup. But no, humans can fight over anything, even broth. Some insist it's a rebellious child of the French pot au feu, that beef bones and long-simmered stock were borrowed ideas, gently nudged to Vietnamese hands by colonization. Others roll their eyes and swear pho is entirely homegrown, a clever twist on older northern Vietnamese beef stews that were already simmering long before a French boot stepped on Hanoi soil. The truth, historians are still bickering about it quietly, of course because arguing about soup too loudly sounds ridiculous, even to them. But while they fuss, you're here, breathing it in, letting the question swirl around like the lazy fat floating on top of that pot. Picture it. Somewhere in a cramped kitchen, a cook stirs the broth, muttering curses at the French under his breath, even while secretly copying their slow cooking technique. And honestly, who can blame him? You don't look at someone else's better tasting stew and say, nah, I'd rather stay mediocre. You steal the idea, make it better, and hope no one notices. The beef is still tough, still chewy, but it's changing. Someone, maybe that same cook, maybe another desperate soul trying to keep customers, starts slicing the meat thinner. Paper thin. You can almost see your fingers through it. That right there is genius. Because thin meat cooks fast, softens fast, and suddenly the broth doesn't just taste like boiled rope. It tastes like a promise of comfort. You hear the hiss as a fresh handful of those thin slices hits the steaming pot. Your breath catches. And I'll tell you something you probably don't know. The first time someone served pho this way, a few customers accused the vendor of cheating. Too little meat, they grumbled, but of course it wasn't stinginess, it was strategy. A single cow could now feed twice as many people, and if you're clever, you always stretch your miracles. The smell shifts again. You feel it, don't you? The sweetness of the beef sneaks through the heavier, smokier notes. A hint of something else lingers. Cinnamon, maybe. Or star anise. The vendor tosses them in without ceremony, like someone adding a secret ingredient to a love letter, hoping nobody notices, but desperately wanting everyone to taste it. And here's your little odd fact of the night. The earliest pho vendors didn't measure spices. They threw in whatever felt right, sometimes by sniffing the air. Too salty, add another charred onion. Too bland, toss in a stick of cinnamon. Too greasy, skim off the fat, or if you were lazy, pretend the grease was medicine for the soul and serve it anyway. You can't help but smirk at that thought, can you? Imagine some skinny, tired worker being told the slick layer of fat floating on top was good for his spirit. But he ate it, didn't he? Because when you're cold, hungry, and bone-tired, comfort tastes like whatever's in the bowl in front of you. The vendor wipes his hands on his apron, glances at you, and for a split second, you feel like he knows you're not from here, not from now. But he doesn't say anything. He just keeps stirring, and you keep watching, leaning closer to the bubbling surface. The steam hits your face again, hotter this time, and you blink through it because you can't look away. This is history happening in slow motion, one bubble at a time, and somewhere tucked in all that heat and spice, you feel a small thrill, not just because of the soup, but because you know something no one here knows yet. This isn't just dinner. This is the start of a legend. The steam curls heavier now, almost wrapping itself around you like a damp blanket, and you shift slightly on your aching legs. But don't move too far, you're about to see the streets wake up. Not the noisy, frantic city you know. This is a quieter hum, the soft shuffle of early vendors pushing through mist with their balanced on bamboo poles. You hear it first, a creak, a low rhythmic squeak of bamboo bending with weight. Then you see her, or maybe it's him. Hard to tell under the conical hat and the layers of worn fabric, but the gain is unmistakable. Two baskets hanging on either side, swaying gently with each step. Inside, one basket holds the precious pot, still steaming, still breathing its slow, beefy sighs. The other holds everything else, bowls, chopsticks, maybe a few scraps of meat carefully wrapped in banana leaves. You follow with your eyes as she stops at the corner, lowering the pole with a practiced grace that comes from years of doing the same thing every dawn. The baskets settle on the ground with a soft thud, and there it is, your first street-side pho stall. No signs, no chairs, no fancy menus, just the earth, the steam, and a woman who looks like she knows more about patience than any cookbook ever written. The first customers arrive quietly, a man in loose cotton pants, barefoot, his face lined from years of work in the fields. A young boy, probably sent by his mother with a single coin clutched tight in his hand. They squat on low wooden stools that wobble with every movement, and the vendor doesn't even look at them when she ladles the broth. She's done this too many times to need words. And you, crouched just a few steps away, can smell the moment the broth hits the bowl. It's sharper now, clearer than the greasy pots of early experiments. The steam carries a sweetness that makes your stomach twist with envy. Here's something you didn't expect. Those first bowls didn't come loaded with herbs, limes, or fancy sauces. No towers of bean sprouts, no chili paste in neat little jars. Just broth, noodles, and meat. Bare bones, literally. And people ate it without complaining, because when you've been chewing on cold rice cakes for days, even the simplest broth feels like a festival. You watch the boy take his first bite. He slurps loudly, and the vendor doesn't scold him. Instead, there's the tiniest curve of her lips, almost a smile. Slurping means success. Slurping means she can come back tomorrow and the day after, and maybe buy her daughter new shoes before the rainy season. And let me give you a weird fact, one that makes you smirk, even as you sit here drooling. Some early vendors use the same broth for 2, sometimes 3 days straight. They just keep adding bones, topping off with water, hoping no one noticed the tired flavor hiding under all that steam. Did customers complain? Maybe, but they kept eating because it was cheap, hot, and filling. And honestly, when you're hungry enough, you don't question how old your soup is. You can feel the street around you waking up now. A soft clatter of chopsticks, a low hum of voices, a rooster crowing somewhere in the distance. It's not chaos. It's rhythm, the heartbeat of a city slowly learning to love this strange new bowl of noodles. You almost laugh as you notice a tiny detail. The vendor wiping her ladle on the hem of her own shirt before dipping it back into the broth. Hygienic? Not really. But look at those faces around you. No one cares. Hunger doesn't care. Hunger forgives. The vendor shifts her basket slightly, ready to move to the next corner. You feel a pang of disappointment, as if she's leaving you behind. But don't worry, you're not done following her yet. This is only the first street, the first gun, the first whispers of something that will one day conquer the world. For now, you stay crouched, inhaling every wisp of steam, committing the scene to memory, because this is pho in its purest form. No restaurants, no fame, just a tired vendor and a pot that's quietly rewriting history, one wobbly wooden stool at a time. The morning air thickens with heat as the sun creeps lazily over the tiled rooftops, but you don't leave. You can't, not when the pot is finally starting to do what it was always meant to do. You can hear it now, not just bubbling, but humming, a low, steady song that feels almost alive. If you close your eyes, you might even imagine it whispering to itself. Almost there, just a little longer. This, right here, is where the magic happens. You watch as the vendor, her hands calloused, movements precise, leans over the pot and skims the surface with a flat bamboo spoon. The fat glides away in shimmering streaks, leaving behind a broth so clear it catches the sunlight like amber. You inhale, and it's intoxicating. A heady mix of slow melted marrow, roasted bones, and something deeper, almost smoky. The secret, though, it isn't just patience, it's obsession. Here's a truth that no one romanticizes. The best pho cooks back then were borderline maniacs. They stayed up through the night, staring at their pots like gamblers watching dice roll, terrified to look away in case the broth turned cloudy. Some were rumored to set alarms, tiny wooden clappers rigged with string, to wake themselves every hour so they could adjust the fire. One famous cook was said to slap his apprentice awake at midnight, just to ask, "Do you smell that? It's too sweet, add more charred onion." And yes, there's a silly little rumor for you. One vendor in Namdeen supposedly talked to his pot as if it were a stubborn child, scolding it when the broth tasted bland. People swore they heard him muttering, "Behave, or no one will love you." Was he crazy? Probably. But his stall always sold out before sunrise. You can feel why now. The smell has shifted into something you'd almost call elegant, if you weren't crouched in dusty sandals with your knees screaming in protest. It's no longer just food, it's comfort distilled, every bubble carrying hours of worry, love, and exhaustion. The woman tosses in a handful of spices, casual but careful. A few charred onions, blackened almost to ash. Ginger, split and seared until its scent cuts through the heavy meatiness. And there it is, The first time you catch it clearly, the sharp, sweet whisper of star anise. You probably didn't know this. Star anise wasn't added for flavor at first. Some vendors believed it kept the broth from going bad too quickly. Science? Absolutely not. But superstition can taste delicious when you accidentally stumble onto genius. The broth changes color before your eyes, darkening to a warm golden brown. You lean closer, watching how the surface shimmers with a soft glow, and you can't help but grin at yourself. You're drooling over liquid. Clear liquid, and yet you know you'd drink it straight from the pot if no one was looking. A man sits beside you slurping loudly, and for the first time, you envy him so much it hurts. That broth coats his lips, he wipes it away with the back of his hand, not even noticing what treasure he's tasting. The vendor doesn't smile, doesn't talk, doesn't do anything but watch the pot, as if the rest of the world doesn't exist. And maybe for her, it doesn't. Because if you've ever poured your heart into something, anything, you know this feeling. The quiet, relentless need to make it perfect, even if no one else notices. Your stomach growls so loud you want to apologize to the pot itself. But don't worry, you'll get your bowl soon enough. For now, just breathe in, stay crouched, and let the magic keep building. Because this isn't just cooking anymore. This is spell work, slow and steady, and you're lucky enough to be sitting right here while it happens. The air is heavier now, richer, as if the alley itself is soaking up the scent and holding it hostage. You stay perfectly still, because this is the kind of moment you don't dare interrupt. The broth has reached that quiet stage of confidence. It's no longer struggling to become something. It is something, and you can feel it in your chest, like a soft hum that matches your heartbeat. But tonight, or rather then, in this sliver of history, there's a new twist slipping into the pot. Not from here, from far away. You hear it first in the voices. Two men sitting cross-legged near the vendor are arguing in low tones, words sharp but respectful. You lean closer, pretending not to eavesdrop, but of course you are. One says the flavor is too foreign, accusing the vendor of ruining tradition. The other insists the spices make the broth taste almost elegant, like something rich French officers would eat, but better. And that's the truth. The vendor is experimenting. The spices aren't local, not all of them anyway. Star anise, cinnamon, cloves. These whispers traveled here on trade ships long before pho existed, carried by Chinese merchants who probably never imagined their cargo would end up simmering with beef bones in a tiny Vietnamese alley. Here's your strange fact for the night. Some early vendors crushed dried tangerine peel into the broth. It wasn't common and most people hated it, but for a short time, a few obsessed cooks believed it woke up the beef flavor. Did it? Maybe. Or maybe it just tasted like someone accidentally dropped their dessert into the soup. You watch the vendor now, her hands steady as she pinches star anise between her fingers before dropping it into the pot. The spice floats for a second, then sinks slowly, disappearing into the golden surface like a secret being swallowed whole. The scent changes instantly, sweet, sharp, warm in a way that feels nostalgic, even though you weren't alive for this. The vendor doesn't glance up, doesn't care about the quiet debate happening around her. She trusts the broth. She trusts the process. That, more than anything, makes you want to believe in her too. You think about how strange it must have been for the first customers to taste this version of pho. Imagine being used to simple boiled meats, then suddenly getting a mouthful of something that tastes like a festival. No wonder some were suspicious. People fear change, even when it's delicious. The man arguing for tradition slurps loudly, frowns, and mutters, "It's too sweet." The other man smirks and keeps eating, not bothering to reply. His bowl is empty before you can even blink. You laugh under your breath because you know which side history will take, but it's still early and right now, nothing is certain. This broth is still a gamble, a risk in every spoonful. The vendor tosses in a bit more charred onion, maybe to balance the spice, maybe just because she feels like it. And you catch that look on her face. Not joy, not pride, just quiet determination. You've seen it before, haven't you? On people who build things that last. It's the face of someone too busy shaping the future to worry if anyone notices. The steam curls higher now, as if even the air is leaning closer to taste. You stay where you are, your legs cramping, but you don't care. Because this, right here in this little alley of smoke, star anise, and hope, is the moment pho stops being just food and starts becoming art. The mist hangs lower now, thick enough to bead on your eyelashes, and you wipe it away absently because you can't look away. Something new is happening, not in the pot, but on the flat wooden board next to it. The vendor kneels, leans forward, and for the first time tonight, you see what might be just as important as the broth, the noodles. They look nothing like the neat bundles you know from supermarket shelves. No, these are alive in a way. Soft, trembling strips of rice dough, still glistening from being pulled fresh off a hot cloth. You can almost feel the heat radiating from them, like skin that's just touched the sun. She lifts a sheet, thin as morning fog, and drapes it across her fingers. You catch your breath because you can see through it. Light slides across its surface, making it glow pale and fragile, and you think, just for a second, that one careless breath might tear it apart. Here's a secret you might not have heard. Early pho noodles were inconsistent, sometimes hilariously bad. Too thick, and they clumped like overcooked lasagna. Too thin, and they disintegrated in the broth before you could eat them. Vendors spent hours experimenting, sometimes ruining entire batches just to figure out how to make them stretch without breaking. The vendor here seems to have solved it. She lays the sheet flat and, with a small curved knife, begins slicing. The blade moves so smoothly it's almost hypnotic, like watching silk being cut in a tailor's shop. Each strand falls neatly onto a bamboo tray, piling into a soft mound that wobbles when she shakes it gently. And you notice something else. Her hands move quickly, but not carelessly. There's a rhythm, almost like music, and for a ridiculous second, you think she might actually be humming under her breath. The first customers don't care about this artistry, of course. A man nearby shuffles impatiently, tapping his chopsticks against his knee. The vendor ignores him, finishing her work as if she has all the time in the world. And maybe she does, because if you're going to change how a city eats, you don't rush. Here's your odd fact for tonight. Some vendors used to mix tapioca starch with rice flour to make the noodles stretchier. It was a cheap trick and purists hated it, but it kept the noodles from breaking in weak broth. Did this vendor do that? You can't tell, but judging by the way those noodles glisten without sticking, you suspect she knows her craft better than most. She lifts a handful, dropping them into a waiting bowl with a sound softer than rain. The noodles settle like clouds at the bottom, folding into themselves, waiting for the broth, and you can almost feel them sigh in relief, as if they've been waiting for this moment as long as you have. The vendor ladles the broth next, slow and careful, letting it seep through every strand. The noodles shift, twisting slightly, and steam rises in lazy spirals. You lean closer, breathing it in because this is new. Before tonight, pho was just broth and meat, but now, with these delicate ribbons of rice, it's becoming something else entirely. The man waiting finally slurps his first mouthful, and his eyes widen. He doesn't speak, doesn't need to. The look on his face is enough. And you, sitting in the mist with your knees numb and your stomach aching, feel the same way. This is no longer just survival food. This right now feels like the first time pho whispers, "You'll remember me." The alley feels different now, like it's holding its breath. You can sense it in the way people glance toward the vendor, in the way their conversations trail off as she serves another bowl. Something's changed. Not just in the broth, not just in the noodles, but in the way people say the word. You hear it first, soft and quick, almost lost under the hiss of boiling water. "Pho," the boy says, mimicking the vendor's casual tone. It's not the first time the word's been spoken, of course, but it catches your ear because it sounds new, like a name just learning how to walk. Until now, people called this dish other things: xiao trao when it was made with buffalo, sao ba when beef finally took over. Those names were practical, blunt, but they didn't sing, and this new name, pho, short, round, you can almost feel how it rolls off the tongue, smooth as the broth itself. But not everyone likes it yet. Two older men squat nearby, their voices low but heated. One grumbles that this pho nonsense is just a silly trend, that a good honest stew shouldn't need fancy names. The other shrugs, saying it doesn't matter what you call it, as long as it fills your belly. Historians still argue about where the word came from. Some say it's a twist on the French word pho, from pot au feu, warped by local tongues until it became pho, Others claim it's purely Vietnamese, pulled from older words for rice noodles. The truth? No one agrees, and maybe no one ever will. But right now, you're watching the words settle in, shy but determined like a child insisting everyone learn its name. The vendor doesn't say much, she just keeps working, but you notice a tiny change, a flicker in her eyes when someone calls her food pho. She doesn't correct them. She doesn't need to. Sometimes the right name just fits, and everyone knows it before they admit it. Here's a strange little fact for you. A few vendors at the time stubbornly refused to call their dish pho. They stuck with sao, swearing that this new name was for people trying to act fancy. But guess whose stalls emptied first every morning? Not theirs. The word spreads slowly around you, passed from mouth to mouth. A boy whispers it to his sister as they share a bowl. A man mutters it under his breath, testing how it feels to say. And each time, it seems to stick a little deeper, weaving itself into the steam rising from every pot. The vendor ladles another bowl and you realize something. This isn't just about food anymore. Names have power, and this one feels like it's claiming its place in the world, one whispered syllable at a time. You lean back slightly, your legs tingling from sitting too long, and watch as another customer slurps his first spoonful. He sighs, content, and says, "Pho ngon quá," and there it is. The first time you've heard it said with that kind of warmth, like a compliment meant not just for the cook, but for the dish itself. The steam curls higher, almost smug, as if the pot knows it's just been christened. And you sit there in the thickening morning air, smiling to yourself because you can feel it too. This isn't just a bowl of soup anymore. This is pho, and it's here to stay. The morning hum has turned into a quiet buzz, the kind that creeps in when people begin to notice something is better than it used to be. The vendor doesn't look up, doesn't acknowledge the whispers, but you can see it in her hands. Steady, deliberate, almost smug in the way only someone who knows they've done something right can be. And tonight, well, in this moment of time, you witness a quiet revolution. Beef taking the throne. Before this, beef wasn't just unusual. It was almost frowned upon. Cows were precious, workers of the fields, not dinner. Eating one felt a bit like roasting your family's only bicycle. But the French had changed that. They ate beef freely, left piles of bones in their wake, and slowly, ever so reluctantly, Vietnamese cooks started taking advantage of what was discarded. At first, buffalo still ruled the pot. Its flavor was strong, gamey, familiar to those who had chewed tough slices for generations. But now, as you watch the vendor slice through a slab of beef with her worn knife, you can see why buffalo is losing. Beef is softer, more elegant, and when sliced thin, it melts into the broth instead of fighting against it. She lifts a piece, so thin it curls at the edges, and drops it gently into a bowl of steaming noodles. It's barely in the broth before it begins to change color, blushing pink to soft brown in seconds. You lean closer, captivated by how fast it surrenders to the heat. Here's something people don't often talk about. This switch to beef wasn't immediate. Many customers hated it at first, complaining that the flavor was too rich, too decadent for everyday food. One old farmer famously told a vendor that eating beef for breakfast was like wearing silk to dig in the mud. But others, they tasted the broth, felt the warmth in their bones, and didn't care if it was silk or mud. They just wanted more. And slowly, word spread. Beef broth was smoother, cleaner, and didn't leave that heavy, sticky feeling buffalo stew did. The man next to you slurps his bowl greedily, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, and you notice his meat isn't tough at all. It folds easily between his teeth, softened by hours of simmering, and a cook who finally learned exactly how long to let it dance in the pot. Another odd little fact for you. Some vendors, desperate to keep customers loyal, mixed both buffalo and beef for a while, calling it the best of both worlds. It wasn't. People said it tasted confused, like the broth couldn't decide who it wanted to be. Within a year, buffalo quietly disappeared from most pots. You breathe in deeply, letting the steam coat your face, and you almost laugh because you know what's happening even if no one else here does. This isn't just a change in ingredients, this is pho finding its true voice. The vendor ladles another scoop of golden broth, the thin slices of beef swirling inside like petals in a hot spring. The smell hits you harder now, meaty, sweet, and warm with that faint whisper of cinnamon. And as another customer squats down, sighing happily over his first mouthful, you can almost hear the shift, an unspoken agreement passing through the morning air. Buffalo had its time. But now, beef wears the crown. The sun is climbing now, bleeding soft gold into the edges of the mist, and you're still here, hunched and unblinking, because you can feel it. This isn't just breakfast anymore. This is ritual. The street has changed since the first timid bowls. It's busier now, louder in a way that feels alive but not chaotic. Vendors call out softly to each other, baskets clatter against wooden stools, and somewhere nearby a rooster is screaming like it's offended by how good the broth smells. You pull your arms tighter around yourself, partly because the morning is still cool, partly because you're soaking in the scene. There's something about pho in the cold, isn't there? You can almost taste the air itself, sharp, damp, carrying hints of wood smoke and spices. The vendor serves faster now, her hands a blur of practiced grace. She dips, ladles, scatters slices of beef, and every time the hot broth splashes into a bowl, steam erupts like a soft cloud. The customers don't talk much. They don't need to. They just slurp, sigh, and wipe their mouths with the same satisfied rhythm, as if they've all agreed silently that this is the best way to start a day. And you, well, you're lost in it, feeling the way the warmth wraps around you, even though you haven't tasted a single drop. Close your eyes for a second and picture it. You're sitting cross-legged on a tiny wooden stool that wobbles with every breath. The bowl is hot in your hands, almost too hot to hold, and the steam kisses your face as you lean in. The first inhale is everything. Beef, star anise, charred onion, and that subtle whisper of cinnamon. It hits your chest before it hits your tongue. A man next to you groans softly as he drinks his broth, the sound half hunger, half happiness. And you can't help but smile, because that's the thing about pho. It doesn't just feed you, it hugs you from the inside out. Here's an odd fact you probably didn't know. Some early vendors purposely served pho in the coldest hours of dawn, believing it tasted better when your hands were numb. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The contrast of freezing air and burning hot broth made every sip feel like life itself returning to your body. Look around you now. The air is shimmering with steam rising from multiple pots, like the street is breathing in unison. You notice droplets of condensation clinging to the edges of the vendor's basket, rolling slowly down the bamboo as if even the wood is sweating from the heat. And there's this moment, quiet, perfect, when the city feels suspended. The only sound is the soft hiss of boiling water and the rhythmic slurp of noodles. You feel it too. That strange calm that only comes when everyone is too busy enjoying something good to talk about it. The vendor wipes her hands on her apron, glances at the empty bowls stacking beside her, and for the first time this morning, you catch a hint of pride in her eyes. Not arrogance, just that quiet satisfaction of someone who knows she's done something right. The mist is thinning now, sunlight spilling stronger onto the cracked stone street, but you're not leaving. Not yet. Because it isn't just food anymore, it's becoming memory, the kind that sticks to a place, a smell, a single perfect morning. And you can feel it in your bones as you sit there, letting the steam curl around you. Pho isn't just breakfast, it's belonging. The sun climbs higher, burning away the last of the mist, but the street doesn't feel warmer. There's a chill now, not from the air, but from the mood. You feel it, the way you feel a storm coming, even before the clouds arrive. The vendor keeps working, ladling broth into bowls, but her movements are tighter, quicker, like someone trying to stay ahead of something she can't control. And then you notice it. The pot isn't as full as yesterday. The broth looks thinner, weaker, and for the first time since you sat here, you can smell disappointment curling in the steam. This is wartime pho. The rumors started quietly at first. Rations, shortages, meat disappearing into military kitchens, and now you're watching it happen. There's no beef stacked neatly on the cutting board, no proud slices curling into hot broth. Instead, the vendor drops in thin slivers, so thin you almost think she sliced the same piece 3 times to make it last. A man squats beside you, frowning as he pokes at his bowl. Too much noodle, not enough meat. He mutters, and the vendor doesn't even argue. She just keeps working. Because what can she say? There isn't enough meat, and here's your strange fact for tonight. One that would probably make you laugh if it weren't so sad. During the hardest months, some vendors replaced beef with banana blossoms, or even slices of unripe green bananas, soaked in broth until they took on a meaty chew. Others used fried tofu or scrap-dried squid, desperate to keep customers returning even when they couldn't promise real pho. But the oddest substitution, slices of boiled potato dyed with burnt sugar to look like beef. Did people believe it? Not for long. But they ate it anyway because hunger doesn't care about honesty. You glance around and the street feels different. People still slurp, but slower, quieter. It's not joy anymore. It's survival. The broth is watery, the spices dulled from being reused too many times, and yet every bowl is still scraped clean. The vendor glances at her pot, worry flickering in her eyes for the first time. She stirs it slowly, scraping the bottom as if hoping more flavor might magically appear. But you know it won't. And yet, there's something stubborn in her movements. She doesn't quit, doesn't pack up her baskets and go home. Because pho, even like this, even starved of meat and heavy with desperation, still means something. It's a reminder that life goes on, even if all you have is broth thin enough to see the bottom of the bowl. A boy slurps loudly, trying to smile as he wipes his mouth. His mother pats his head, pretending the meal is as good as before. And you feel something tight in your chest because you know they're lying to themselves. But you also know they'll be back tomorrow. Pho has become more than taste now. It's hope. A thin, watery hope, maybe, but still hot, still filling, still enough to make a cold morning bearable. The vendor lifts her ladle again, her hands steady despite the fear hiding in her eyes, and you stay crouched, letting the weaker steam wash over you, because even this stripped-down, starved version is still pho, and that means something worth holding on to. The morning haze feels different now, lighter, freer, as you step, still crouched in your mind, into another street far from the cold alleys of Hanoi. The air is warmer here, softer somehow, and the smell of pho carries a sweetness that doesn't quite belong to the northern bowls you've been following. Welcome to Saigon. The vendor here moves differently. She's quicker, brighter, almost cheerful in a way you hadn't seen before. Her gain isn't weighed down with worry the way northern vendors carried theirs. Her baskets are stuffed with greens, bean sprouts, even fresh herbs spilling out like tiny jungles. This is pho reborn, pho nam. The broth is the first thing you notice. It's richer, rounder, with a sweetness that surprises you. Northern pho whispered, this one practically hums in your chest. She ladles it high, letting it fall into the bowl in a shimmering cascade, and the smell, oh, you catch it instantly. Star anise, yes, but there's something almost caramel-like, as if the bones were coaxed into giving up every last secret. Here's a curious fact. Southern vendors sometimes added a touch of rock sugar to their broth, just enough to round out the flavor, to make it dance on the tongue. Northerners would scoff, calling it too indulgent, too fancy, but Southerners didn't care. Life was hotter here, busier, louder. Why shouldn't the soup be the same? The noodles look familiar, but sit differently in the bowl. Softer, maybe because of the hotter climate making dough behave strangely. And the meat, oh, there's more of it. Thin slices of beef layered generously as if southern vendors wanted every customer to feel spoiled. Then come the herbs. A handful of fresh Thai basil, crisp bean sprouts, maybe a slice of chili for those who like to sweat through breakfast. Northerners would have frowned, muttering that too many toppings ruin the delicate balance. But here, the more the better. It's a different philosophy entirely. Pho isn't just comfort here, it's a feast. You watch a man drizzle hoisin sauce and squeeze lime into his bowl, stirring until the broth changes color. And that's another thing. Southerners aren't shy about sauces. They dip beef in chili paste, mix hoisin with sriracha, anything to make the flavor punch harder. The vendor doesn't mind. She even encourages it, handing out small dishes of sauce with a smile. Northerners might see this as sacrilege, but to the people here, pho is personal. No two bowls need to taste the same, and here's your odd fact of the night. Some of the earliest pho nam vendors were former Northerners who fled south, carrying their recipes with them. But the southern climate, the abundance of fresh herbs, and the local taste for sweeter broths transformed those recipes completely within a generation. It wasn't betrayal, it was adaptation. You breathe in again, and the difference between north and south feels clear, not just in flavor, but in spirit. Northern Pho is quiet, restrained, like a secret whispered at dawn. Southern Pho laughs, talks loudly, piles on extra basil, and doesn't apologize. A young woman slurps her bowl happily, her bracelets clinking as she digs for more bean sprouts, and you can't help but smile. Because you know, sitting here in the warm southern morning, that pho has stopped being one thing. Now it's two voices, different, distinct, but still undeniably part of the same song. The air hums with a different kind of energy now. Not from the bubbling pot to the clinking chopsticks, but from conversations. Everywhere you listen, people are debating, their voices rising and falling like the steam swirling between them. And you can feel it in the tension of their words. Pho has become more than just food. It's pride. Two men sit close to you, their bowls balanced precariously on wobbly stools, and they're arguing in that polite but sharp way people do when they know they're right and are deeply offended that someone else doesn't agree. Buck my doom la pho, the first man says, his chopsticks tapping the rim of his bowl for emphasis. Clear broth, delicate flavor. That's pho. Anything else is just soup pretending to be pho. The second man snorts, stuffing a sprig of basil into his mouth before replying. Delicate. That's just another word for boring. Pho nam kahon hun. Rich, sweet, alive. Buck tastes like someone was afraid of enjoying themselves. And there it is, the Great Pho War, or at least the earliest version of it. Historians, of course, would later write whole essays trying to classify the two styles, but you're seeing it raw right here in the middle of the street. Northern Pho, born in Hanoi, is austere, minimal, all about balance. Southern Pho, shaped by Saigon's energy, is indulgent, generous, and loud in every way. Odd fact for tonight, some vendors in the early days actually hung signs declaring their allegiance. Pho Buc Ching Hill or Pho Nam Ngo Dum Da, as if customers needed to pick a side in a culinary civil war. You glance at the vendor, wondering if she cares about this debate, but she doesn't even look up. She's too busy serving bowls, adding toppings without pausing to ask which side they prefer. Because honestly, as long as people are eating, the pot wins. Still, you can feel the tension in the air as more voices join the argument. A young woman nearby declares that Southern Pho is too sweet, like drinking beef candy, and a man fires back that Northern Pho tastes like someone boiled bones and forgot the seasoning. The funniest part? They're all still eating. Every insult punctuated by a loud, satisfied slurp. You watch as a boy, too young to care about regional loyalties, leans over his bowl, mixing hoisin and chili sauce with reckless abandon. He grins at his own creation, blissfully ignoring the argument around him. And maybe that's the real answer, isn't it? Pho doesn't belong to one side anymore. It belongs to anyone with an empty stomach and a pair of chopsticks. The vendor finally looks up for a moment, her eyes sweeping over the bickering customers, and you catch the tiniest smirk on her face. She knows something they don't. No matter how much they argue, they'll be back tomorrow, bowls in hand, ready to fight all over again. You stay crouched, letting the debate wash over you, and you feel strangely calm. Because this is what happens when food becomes love. People fight over it not because they hate it, but because they care too much. The broth bubbles steadily behind the vendor, indifferent to their words, as if whispering, "Argue all you want. You'll still finish me to the last drop." The argument fades into the background now, replaced by something softer, almost secretive. You catch it in the way two older women lean close to each other, whispering as they stir their bowls as if sharing gossip too sacred for loud voices. But it's not about politics or neighbors. It's about a question so simple, so deceptively small, it splits pho lovers quietly into two camps. Nook mum or not. You blink, surprised. Of course there's fish sauce in pho, right? That salty, deep, almost ocean-like flavor is part of its soul. But here, in this moment of history, the answer isn't so clear. The vendor ladles another bowl, her movements calm, and you notice she doesn't reach for a bottle of fish sauce at all. She's relying entirely on the bones, the spices, the charred onion to build flavor, and she's not alone. Here's your odd fact for tonight. Early pho recipes didn't always include fish sauce. Some cooks thought its sharp, briny punch overwhelmed the delicate beef broth. They wanted the flavor to be clean, pure, almost polite. Fish sauce, with its bold, unapologetic personality, was considered a little too loud for such a refined dish, but as pho moved south, things changed. Southern cooks embraced nuoc mam without hesitation, pouring it into broth, mixing it into dipping sauces, letting its funky, salty depth coat every bite. For them, it wasn't just seasoning, it was identity. The two women near you are still debating, their whispers growing sharper. The broth is enough, one insists, tapping her chopsticks for emphasis. If it's good, you don't need fish sauce. The other woman snorts. No fish sauce? Then it's just hot beef tea. What's the point? You can't help but smile at that because she's not wrong. Pho without fish sauce feels almost incomplete once you've tasted the version that embraces it. But standing here, watching this vendor carefully skim her broth, you understand the other side too. There's something almost meditative about relying solely on bones and time, as if adding fish sauce would be admitting defeat. The vendor doesn't join their debate. She simply slides a tiny dish of fish sauce to the edge of her basket for those who want it. No judgment, no rules. Just quiet acceptance that pho is as much about the eater as it is about the cook. A young man nearby dips a slice of beef into that little dish, savoring the salty kick, while another customer pushes it aside, choosing to enjoy the broth exactly as it is. Two approaches, two truths, and neither is wrong. The steam rises higher now, wrapping around you, and you can almost taste both versions. The restrained, elegant pho of the north and the bold, sauce-rich pho of the south. They don't cancel each other out. They just coexist. Two sides of the same story. Both valid, both delicious. You crouch there a little longer, smiling at the quiet compromise happening around you. Because that's the thing about pho, it doesn't force you to choose. It just waits, patient and warm, letting you decide how much of yourself you want to stir into the bowl. The sun hangs higher now, throwing bright streaks across the street, but somehow the energy feels slower, heavier. Maybe it's the long lines forming at the vendor's stall, or maybe it's the way people are holding their bowls carefully, almost reverently, as if afraid to spill even a drop. You notice the vendor ladling broth extra precision, the dish be in it with extra precision, stretching each scoop thinner than yesterday. This is the age of ration books of scarcity. You feel it in the way people shuffle forward, each clutching a small square of paper. Temfio, food coupons that determine not just what you can eat, but how much. The vendor checks each one quickly, nodding to herself before serving exactly the amount allowed. No more, no less. The broth itself has changed. It's thinner, paler, the golden richness you admired before replaced by a faintly oily film trying its best to look luxurious. You can almost smell the desperation, bones boiled too many times, water added again and again just to fill the pot. And the meat, well, calling it meat feels generous. A man holds up his chopsticks, examining a single slice so thin it's practically translucent. He laughs bitterly, shaking his head, but then shrugs and eats it anyway. Because what choice does he have? Here's your odd fact for tonight. In the tightest rationing years, vendors sometimes cut beef so thin and so sparingly that a single cow could feed hundreds of people, even if no one actually felt fed. Some stalls didn't even bother pretending. They served bowls with just noodles, broth, and maybe a hint of fat floating like a ghost of what pho used to be. A few creative vendors added tiny cubes of fried lard or scraps of rendered pork skin to trick the tongue into thinking it was tasting beef. You glance at the vendor now. She moves quickly, mechanically, but there's something sad in her eyes as she slides another nearly empty bowl across the counter. She doesn't apologize. She can't. Everyone already knows this isn't about choice, it's survival. Yet, something remarkable happens. No one yells, no one storms away. People still sit on their wobbly stools, still slurp, still smile at each other between bites. A mother quietly tilts her bowl toward her son, giving him the thicker noodles. An old man wipes his mouth and mutters, half joking, "At least it's hot." A boy laughs, stirring his noodles to make them look like there's more food than there really is. Because pho, even stripped to its bones, literally, is still pho. It's warmth in a cold morning, comfort in a time when comfort is rare. You stay crouched, watching as the vendor wipes sweat from her brow, her hands never stopping. And for a strange moment, you realize this is just as important as the rich, fragrant pho you've smelled before. Because this right here is pho as a promise. We're still here, still eating, still waiting for better days. The steam rises, thinner than before, but still warm against your face, and you can't help but smile because even in its weakest form, pho refuses to disappear. The air feels thicker again, but not from scarcity this time. There's a new kind of energy swirling with the steam, curious, amused, almost skeptical. You notice the vendor's pot shimmering with a richer, darker broth, and the customers leaning in, whispering to each other as if they're watching something daring unfold. Because today, for the first time, foreigners are sitting at the stools. French officers stiff-backed in their pressed uniforms, and a few curious colonial workers with sunburned faces, and they're staring at the bowls in front of them like they've been handed a puzzle. You watch as one officer dips his spoon, lifts it carefully, and blows on the broth with exaggerated care. He sips, slowly, cautiously, and then his eyes widen just enough for you to catch it. He doesn't speak, not yet, but his expression betrays him. Surprise. The vendor pretends not to notice, but you can see the corner of her mouth twitching. She's proud, even if she won't say it. Here's your odd fact for tonight. French soldiers were among the first foreigners to taste pho, and many didn't understand it at first. Some complained it was too plain, missing the heavy butter and wine sauces of home. But others were fascinated by its clarity, how something so simple could taste so layered. A younger officer slurps loudly, much to the horror of his polished companion, and grins. C'est très bon, he mutters, fumbling with the chopsticks before giving up entirely and drinking straight from the bowl. A few Vietnamese customers laugh quietly, not unkindly, but with that knowing amusement of people who've mastered something someone else is just discovering. The vendor serves another bowl, sliding it to a French worker who sniffs it skeptically before dipping in a piece of bread instead of noodles. And that's another fun fact. Some Frenchmen ate pho like a stew, tearing chunks of baguette into the broth because it felt more familiar to them. Did it taste right? Maybe not, but it worked for them. You can almost feel the moment the officers exchange glances, realizing this street food isn't just a quick meal. It's something worth talking about. One of them murmurs to his companion, gesturing at the pot, and you catch the word pot au pho. Ah, yes, the comparison everyone will make for decades. To them, pho feels like a rustic cousin to their beloved beef stew, but you know better. Pho might have borrowed the idea of simmering bones for hours, but it's not a copy. It's sharper, cleaner, carrying whispers of cinnamon, star anise, and charred onion that no French stew ever dreamed of. The officer takes another sip. Slower this time, his face softening into something almost like respect. He nods toward the vendor, who gives the smallest bow of acknowledgement before turning back to her pot. And you, still crouched, still watching, realize this is a quiet turning point. Pho is no longer just feeding locals, it's stepping into the curious mouths of people who will carry its story elsewhere, even if they don't understand it yet. The steam rises, wrapping everyone, Vietnamese and French alike, in the same warmth. Different languages, different worlds, but for this moment, they're all just people sitting on low stools, slurping from the same kind of bowl. And you smile to yourself because you know what they don't. This little street corner is the start of pho's first steps beyond its homeland. The sun dips lower now, casting long shadows across the street, but the vendor isn't slowing down. If anything, the pace is picking up. The air feels busier, filled with chatter and laughter, and you can smell something new wafting from the pot, familiar yet slightly different, brighter somehow. Because this isn't just about broth and noodles anymore. Today, toppings have entered the stage. You notice it first when the vendor reaches for a small basket beside her guine, pulling out thinly sliced shallots glistening with oil. She scatters them over a steaming bowl, and the scent hits you immediately. Sweet, nutty, with that faint crispness only fried shallots can give. The customer's eyes light up as he stirs them into his broth, and you can practically hear the crunch as he bites down. Here's your odd fact for tonight. Fried shallots weren't part of the earliest pho recipes. They were borrowed from other noodle dishes, added by inventive vendors looking to make their bowls stand out. And once customers tasted that golden, crispy bite melting into rich broth, there was no going back. The vendor doesn't stop there. She pulls a small basket of limes, their bright green skins catching the fading sunlight. She slices one quickly, squeezing a wedge into the next bowl before handing it off. A soft hiss escapes the broth as the juice hits, and you can almost taste the change, sharp, fresh, cutting through the richness like a whisper of sunlight on a cold morning. A man sitting nearby sniffs, intrigued, and immediately asks for lime in his bowl too. And just like that, a new habit is born. But not everyone approves. Two older customers mutter under their breath, shaking their heads. Too fancy, one complains. Pho is supposed to taste like meat, not like salad. The vendor doesn't argue. She simply places a wedge of lime on the side, letting them decide. And that's how pho evolves, not by force, but by quiet choices, one curious eater at a time. The steam around you smells different now, layered with the brightness of lime and the warm, toasty scent of shallots. A boy sitting cross-legged stirs his bowl, giggling as the shallots soften and sink, turning the broth slightly cloudy. Here's another little-known fact. Some vendors began offering chili slices around this time, though cautiously. They'd place them in small dishes on the side, unsure if customers would find the heat overwhelming. But of course, someone always dunked too many in and left the stall coughing happily, eyes watering, insisting it was perfect. You crouch there, smiling as you watch the vendor hand out tiny plates of optional toppings. It feels almost like she's giving people permission to make their pho personal, to turn each bowl into something uniquely theirs. The street hums with the sound of slurping, louder now, punctuated by quiet murmurs of approval. And you realize this is another small but important turning point. Pho isn't just comfort food anymore. It's starting to flirt with customization, becoming a dish people can shape to their own tastes. The vendor sprinkles another handful of shallots into a waiting bowl, the steam curling upward like a soft ribbon, and you feel your stomach tighten with hunger. Because right now, pho doesn't just smell like survival or tradition. It smells like fun. The sun has slipped behind the rooftops now, leaving the street bathed in that soft, golden haze that makes everything feel like a memory before it's even gone. The steam rising from the vendor's pot glows in the fading light, curling lazily upward, as if it knows it's hiding something special. And tonight, well, in this moment, you're about to glimpse secrets most people never get to see. Because not all pho stalls are created equal. Some are just ordinary. But others, like this one, are whispered about in hushed voices as if they're guarding magic. The vendor moves differently from the others you've watched. Her hands are slower, more deliberate, and you notice her pot isn't the usual battered metal. It's clay, dark, heavy, and cracked with age, as if it's been cooking broth longer than some of the customers have been alive. Here's your odd fact for tonight. A few legendary pho vendors swore by clay pots instead of metal ones, believing they held heat more evenly and made the broth taste deeper, richer. Was it true? No one agrees, but those who tasted it swore they could tell, even blindfolded. The vendor lifts the lid and you almost gasp because the smell is different. The broth seems thicker, darker, with a depth you can practically feel tugging at your chest. There's an earthy warmth, as if the clay itself has given part of its soul to the soup. She doesn't speak, doesn't advertise. In fact, she seems almost annoyed when too many people gather around, as if she'd rather stay invisible. But of course, people come anyway, quietly, respectfully, because bowls from this stall taste like nowhere else. A man crouches beside you, sipping his first spoonful, and his eyes close immediately. He doesn't talk, doesn't even move for a moment. Just sits there with that faraway look people get when something tastes better than they expected. The vendor has other secrets too. She's roasting her spices in a small pan before dropping them into the pot, toasting them until the air smells faintly of smoke and licorice. Most vendors toss their spices in raw, but she takes the extra time, muttering to herself as she works. You catch a glimpse of something else, tiny jars tucked into her basket, one holding what looks like dried shrimp shells. She pinches a few in, quick and discreet, as if hoping no one notices. And here's your strange little secret. Some old-school vendors added shrimp shells or even dried squid to deepen the umami, though they'd never admit it publicly for fear of being accused of ruining pho. You sit there, knees aching, mesmerized by how quietly she works. There's no showmanship, no smiles for customers, just the steady rhythm of someone who's cooked the same way for decades. Not for fame, but because she can't imagine doing it any other way. The Customers seem to know better than to ask for extra toppings or sauces here. They eat in silence, letting the clay pot do the talking. And you, still crouched, still breathing in that smoky sweet aroma, feel like you're watching something sacred, almost holy, unfold in front of you. The steam thickens, wrapping around you like a soft blanket, and you understand now why people whisper about stalls like this. Because some bowls aren't just food. They're secrets you're lucky enough to taste once in a lifetime. The evening deepens, and for the first time since you began this quiet journey, the steam rising from the pot feels foreign. Not wrong, just new. Because tonight, Pho isn't staying in the alleys of Hanoi or the bustling streets of Saigon. It's getting ready to travel. You hear it in the voices around you, strangers speaking in accents that don't belong here. Words clipped and sharp, mixed with Vietnamese syllables spoken slowly, carefully. You glance to the edge of the crowd, where two young men are packing something unusual into wooden crates. Glass jars filled with spices, dried noodles wrapped in paper, even packets of carefully roasted star anise. This is Pho preparing to leave home. The first step isn't glamorous. There's no grand plan, no official export. It starts quietly, almost accidentally, carried by the hands of Vietnamese workers and families, traveling to other cities, other countries. Some bring only memories of its taste. Others tuck small spice packets into their luggage like secret treasures. And then it happens. Paris. Here's your odd fact for tonight. The first bowls of pho served in Paris weren't sold in restaurants. They were cooked in small apartments by Vietnamese immigrants craving home, shared among friends who sat cross-legged on floors, eating with mismatched bowls and borrowed chopsticks. Word spread quickly, faster than anyone expected. Soon, a tiny restaurant opened in a tucked-away corner of the city. The sign simply read, Pho, handwritten, no accents, because French printers didn't bother. At first, locals wandered in out of curiosity. Some wrinkled their noses at the steam, muttering about smelling like anise for days, but others stayed, curious about this fragrant, mysterious soup. A young French student, hair tousled, eyes bright with curiosity, takes his first sip. He pauses, tilts his head as if trying to decode a secret message, and then he laughs, delighted, waving his spoon like he's discovered something the rest of Paris doesn't know yet. Across the ocean, in California, it's a different story. Vietnamese refugees arriving with almost nothing open small pho shops to survive. The signs are bolder here, sometimes proudly declaring Pho Go Pho, best soup in town, in big, blocky letters. Customers don't always know how to pronounce it. Some say pho, others pho, and a few just point at the menu nervously. But they eat. Oh, they eat. And here's a quirky little secret. In those early American pho shops, owners often adjusted the broth slightly, making it sweeter or adding more meat to appeal to Western tastes. Purists back home would have scolded them, but it worked. The bowls sold out. You sit there crouched in the fading light, but your mind drifts with the steam, traveling far beyond this street. You can almost hear the soft clatter of spoons in a Paris apartment, the hum of conversation in a noisy California diner. Pho has crossed oceans now, carried by people who couldn't leave their memories behind. The vendor here doesn't know any of this yet. She just keeps ladling broth, serving bowls to tired workers. But you smile because you do. This little pot, this humble street corner, has no idea it's already started conquering the world, one steaming bowl at a time. The night is cooler now, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like an old blanket, and the street feels slower. But the pot in front of you, oh, it's alive in a way you haven't seen before. It bubbles with the soft, steady rhythm of someone who refuses to stop working, no matter how tired they are. Because tonight isn't about pho spreading to the world. Tonight is about the people who kept it alive long before it became famous. You notice the vendor differently now. Her hair is streaked with gray, her hands rough, calloused from years of holding ladles and bamboo baskets. But her movements are still graceful, still deliberate, like she's conducting an orchestra only she can hear. And maybe she is. Because for some cooks, pho isn't just a job, it's a lifetime. Here's your odd fact for tonight. There are legends of pho cooks so obsessed with perfection, they treated their pots like family. One man in Nam Ding was known to start cooking at midnight every night, tasting the broth every hour, even if it meant sleeping only 2 or 3 hours a day. Neighbors said they'd see him standing over the pot at dawn, muttering to himself, "Not yet, not perfect." And then there's the story of a woman in Hanoi who refused to teach her recipe to anyone but her eldest daughter, claiming not everyone deserves to know how to make pho sing. She stirred her pot with the same wooden spoon for 30 years, never replacing it, convinced the wood had learned the flavor over time. The vendor in front of you feels like one of those legends. She doesn't smile, doesn't chat with customers. She's too focused on the pot. You watch as she tilts her head slightly, listening to the broth as if it's whispering secrets. She adjusts the fire, skims a thin layer of fat, and tastes the broth with the tip of a bamboo spoon. Her expression doesn't change, but you can feel it. She's pleased. A young boy crouches near her, wide-eyed, watching every move. Maybe he's her apprentice, maybe her grandson, but you can see the same fascination in his gaze that you feel in your chest. The vendor ladles a bowl, places it in front of a customer, and for a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, she smiles. Not at the customer, not even at the bowl, but at the broth itself, as if thanking it for cooperating tonight. Because that's the thing about pho. It's not just cooking, it's negotiation. Some days the bones give up their sweetness easily. Other days, you coax it out slowly, patiently, as if persuading an old friend to share a secret. The customers eat quietly, their faces softening with every slurp, and you realize this vendor isn't chasing fame, isn't dreaming of Paris or California or anywhere else. Pho is making headlines now. She's cooking for this street, for these people, for this exact moment. And somehow that feels even more powerful than all the fancy restaurants in the world. The steam rises higher, thicker, catching the glow of the lanterns, and you stay crouched, watching her hands move with quiet mastery. Because right here, right now, you're not just watching pho being made. You're watching someone dedicate their entire life to making a single bowl perfect. The lantern light wavers, casting long shadows that dance across the cracked stone street, and the smell of the broth lingers heavier tonight. But there's something different in the air now, lighter, almost playful. Because for the first time, pho is about to change in a way its earliest cooks could never have imagined. This is the dawn of instant pho. You catch it in the whispers first. Two young men sitting on low stools are arguing, their voices rising above the soft hiss of boiling broth. It's cheating, one insists, jabbing his chopsticks into the air. Real pho takes hours, days. This quick pho stuff, it's not the same. The other shrugs, grinning as he slurps his bowl. Not the same, sure, but who has time to wait all night? Sometimes you just want pho now. You lean closer, curious, because you already know what they're talking about. Here's your odd fact for tonight. The first packaged pho dehydrated noodles with powdered broth appeared quietly in the mid-20th century, inspired by the success of instant ramen. The earliest versions were laughably bad. People said the broth tasted like salty water pretending to be beef, and the noodles had the texture of soggy paper. But it was cheap, fast, and required nothing more than hot water. And for busy workers or students, that was enough. A small group of customers nearby are holding packets of these new noodles, showing them off like curious trinkets. One laughs as he shakes the packet, listening to the dry noodles rattle inside. But the vendor in front of you, she isn't laughing. She doesn't even look at the packets. She just keeps ladling her broth the same way she's always done, as if the very idea of powdered soup is beneath her. And maybe it is. The funny thing, instant pho didn't start as an insult to traditional vendors. It was survival, a way to bring a taste of home to people who couldn't spend hours simmering bones. Refugees, factory workers, even students studying abroad. Instant pho was their compromise, their way of staying connected to something they missed deeply. You watch as a young woman at the edge of the crowd tears open a packet, sprinkling the dried seasoning into a chipped bowl. She pours hot water over it, waits only a minute, and takes a bite. Her expression softens, not with awe, but with quiet relief. And you understand. It's not perfect, not even close, but it's still pho in spirit. The vendor glances over for the briefest moment, her expression unreadable. Maybe she's annoyed, maybe she pities the packet pho, or maybe she understands what you do. This instant version isn't replacing her, it's carrying her work to places she'll never see. The steam rises around you, thicker, richer than anything a packet could dream of. And you smile despite yourself, because even though pho in a packet will never taste like this clay pot magic, it means something important. Pho has grown too big to stay in one place. It's no longer just a dish. It's becoming a memory people can hold in their hands, even if only for 3 rushed minutes over boiling water. You stay crouched, breathing in the real thing, but you don't laugh at the instant bowl, because you know, somewhere far away, someone else is sitting in a tiny apartment, slurping their powdered broth with closed eyes, whispering to themselves, "It's not perfect, but it feels like home." The night has deepened, the lanterns glowing softer now, and the air carries a strange mix of curiosity and skepticism. You notice it in the conversations. Customers leaning close, lowering their voices, as if discussing something mildly scandalous. And when you turn your head, you see why. Pho is changing again, this time in bizarre ways. At the far edge of the street, a younger vendor is stirring a pot with exaggerated flair, clearly enjoying the attention. His gun doesn't smell quite right, at least not in the way you expect pho to smell. There's still the rich beefiness, the warm star anise, but there's something else, sharp, creamy, almost sweet. You inch closer, trying not to laugh when you finally see what he's doing. A slice of bright yellow cheese slides into the broth, melting slowly until the surface shimmers with oily streaks. Pho my, cheese pho, customers murmur in disbelief. One man shakes his head, muttering, "That's not pho, that's some kind of stew pretending to be pho." But a group of younger diners giggle as they stir the melted cheese into their noodles, delighted by how wrong and indulgent it feels. Here's your odd fact for tonight. During the waves of modern food experimentation in the late 20th century, vendors tried all sorts of wild variations to attract curious eaters. Pho with cheese, pho with coconut milk, even pho flavored with durian, in one infamous stall that closed after a week because the smell was so overpowering. But the strangest, chocolate pho. A short-lived experiment where cocoa powder was whisked into the broth, creating something halfway between soup and dessert. Food critics called it a crime against noodles. The vendor here seems proud of his cheesy creation, ladling the broth theatrically into bowls as if he's inventing the future. A girl sitting nearby dips her chapsticks, twirls the noodles, and takes a bite. Her eyes widen, not in disgust but in surprise, and she laughs. "It's weird," she says, "but not bad." The older customers aren't convinced. One woman mutters that this new generation doesn't respect tradition, that real pho doesn't need gimmicks. But the younger diners don't care. They slurp, they smile, they take another bite. And here's the quiet truth you notice, crouched there in the steam. Even these strange experiments, no matter how absurd, are a kind of love letter to pho. People wouldn't bother trying to twist it into something new if they didn't care about it deeply. Still, as you breathe in the rich, cheesy steam, you can't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the traditional vendor across the street. Her clay pot bubbles away, unbothered by trends, its aroma steady and reassuring. Customers still line up at her stall, choosing the familiar over the flashy. The night air carries both scents now, the comforting, time-honored richness of classic pho, and the sharp, odd tang of melted cheese. And you realize this is what happens when something beloved grows too big. It gets pulled in every direction, stretched, experimented on, sometimes ruined, sometimes reborn. You stay crouched, smiling to yourself, because you know the truth. Most of these crazy versions won't last. Pho doesn't need gimmicks to survive. It's too strong, too deeply rooted in memory and comfort. But for now, let them play. Even when it's covered in cheese, pho is still pho, still finding new ways to surprise people, even if only for a laugh. The night hums with an energy you haven't felt before, the kind of quiet buzz that comes when something small suddenly finds itself in the spotlight. The vendor's stall is still here, still steaming in the golden light of her clay pot, but tonight there are whispers, not just of customers, but of names, big names, because pho isn't just a street food anymore. Celebrities have started noticing. You hear it in the chatter of a group of young customers sitting cross-legged near the stall. One of them, his voice loud with excitement, waves a wrinkled newspaper. "Did you read it? That American actor, what's his name? He said pho was the best soup he's ever had." The others lean closer, murmuring in amazement. You catch fragments of their conversation, mentions of Hollywood stars filming in Vietnam, of models posting pictures with steaming bowls on glossy magazine spreads. Here's your odd fact for tonight. Pho began appearing in international magazines and talk shows during the late 20th century, often praised by traveling journalists and celebrities. Julia Roberts was once photographed sipping pho in Hanoi while filming Eat, Pray, Love. And Anthony Bourdain, he didn't just eat pho, he declared it one of the greatest dishes in the world, sending countless curious travelers hunting for it. And it's not just Western stars. Vietnamese singers and actors often made public appearances at famous pho stalls, proudly declaring their favorite bowl. These small endorsements mattered. Suddenly, a humble street stall could become a destination, a place where fans lined up not just for the broth, but for the chance to sit where their idols had sat. A man nearby pulls out his phone, a rare, clunky device in this timeline, and shows off a grainy photo of a famous singer eating pho in Saigon. His friends lean in, laughing, teasing him for treating it like holy relic. The vendor, though, she doesn't seem impressed. She ladles her broth the same as always, her expression unchanged, even as more customers gather, whispering rumors that somebody important might visit her stall tonight. But you notice something subtle. She straightens her pot, wipes her ladle clean between servings. Not for the celebrities, no, she's not cooking for them. She's cooking for the broth the same way she always has. You crouch there watching the steam curl upward, imagining the journey ahead. Pho isn't just for tired workers or busy students anymore. It's becoming a symbol, a dish people photograph, praise on television, and chase across cities. And yet as you breathe in that familiar rich aroma, you realize something. No matter how many celebrities pose with their bowls, pho doesn't change its essence. It doesn't need fame. It just keeps bubbling quietly, waiting patiently. Because whether you're a farmer in Hanoi or a movie star in Los Angeles, the feeling when you take that first hot slurp is exactly the same. The vendor ladles another perfect bowl, setting it down gently, and you can almost hear the broth whisper to itself. Famous or not, you'll still finish me to the last drop. The morning light feels sharper here, filtering through wooden shutters into a quiet room filled not with the hum of street vendors, but with the clinking of glass and the low murmur of serious voices. This isn't an alley or a bustling pho stall anymore. Tonight you're watching something far stranger. Science trying to understand soup. Yes, really. The first thing you notice is the table covered in odd tools, metal probes, small glass beakers, and a scale so precise it looks like it belongs in a laboratory, not a kitchen. And in the center, steaming gently in a controlled little burner, is a pot of pho. A man in a white coat leans over it, scribbling notes. The fat emulsifies differently if you roast the bones first, he mutters, adjusting his glasses. His colleague, a younger woman, dips a thermometer into the broth, her brow furrowed in concentration. Because tonight isn't about tradition or memory. It's about figuring out why pho works. Here's your curious fact for tonight. Culinary scientists and food researchers have spent years studying pho, breaking it down into its chemical components to understand why it tastes so addictive. They discovered that the long simmered beef bones release high levels of glutamate, the same natural compound that makes Parmesan cheese and ripe tomatoes taste so satisfying. That's why pho has that deep, savory, umami kick that makes you crave it long after the bowl is empty. The woman lifts a spoonful of broth to her nose, inhaling deeply before noting the star anise releases trans-anethol, same compound that gives licorice its sweetness. The man nods, adding, and the charred onions, they're full of caramelized sugars. It balances the beef's richness. You almost laugh, crouched in the corner, because while they're busy talking about molecules, you know every vendor they're trying to decode would just shrug and say, I know it's right because it smells right. But the scientists aren't wrong. Every bubble, every layer of shimmering fat, every burnt edge of ginger floating in the pot is part of a precise chemical orchestra, even if the old cooks never called it that. Here's something even stranger. One study suggested that the combination of warm spices, high umami levels, and rising steam can actually trigger the brain to release dopamine, the happy chemical. In other words, pho doesn't just fill your stomach, it literally makes you happier. You watch as the man carefully spoons some broth into a small, clear cup, holding it up to the light like fine wine. He swirls it, nodding approvingly, then takes a sip. His face softens instantly, and for the first time, he stops talking like a scientist. "It's perfect," he whispers, almost to himself. And that's the funny thing, isn't it? No matter how many charts they draw or compounds they measure, at the end of the day, pho doesn't need science to explain why it feels so good. The woman takes her own sip, sighs happily, and laughs. "All this work," she says, "and still, the best explanation is just, it tastes like home." The steam curls upward, catching the morning light, and you can't help but smile, because they're right. Whether you understand it with your heart or with chemical equations, pho does the same thing to everyone. It makes you warm, it makes you full, and without you even realizing, it makes you happy. The morning is quiet, softer than usual, with a gentler rhythm to the steam rising from the pot. There's no rush, no crowd of hungry workers shuffling for their turn. Today feels different, calmer, almost serene, because today, the pot isn't filled with bones and beef. Today, this is pho chai, vegetarian pho. You notice the vendor immediately. She moves slower, more delicate, as if she's handling something fragile. The pot in front of her doesn't carry the heavy, meaty aroma you're used to. Instead, it smells light, earthy, almost floral, like rain on fresh soil. She ladles the broth carefully, and you can see its color is paler, clear as amber tea. But the scent, oh, the scent is layered in its own way. Roasted onions, charred ginger, dried shiitake mushrooms, and something sweet you can't quite place, maybe slow-simmered daikon or caramelized carrots. Here's your curious fact for tonight. Vegetarian pho isn't new. Buddhist monks in Vietnam have been making it for centuries, long before it became trendy in modern restaurants. Their version, made entirely from vegetables and dried mushrooms, was created not just for taste, but as an act of mindfulness. Each simmering bubble meant to honor life by not taking it. A young woman sits nearby, her hands clasped around the hot bowl as if she's holding something sacred. She takes a slow sip, and her face softens into a quiet smile. You realize this is what pho chai does. It doesn't overwhelm you, it soothes you. The vendor sprinkles fresh herbs over the top, cilantro, sawtooth coriander, a tiny handful of Thai basil. Thin slices of tofu rest gently on the noodles, browned at the edges from being lightly pan-fried. It's simple, humble, but when the steam hits your nose, you know it's just as carefully made as the richest beef broth. Another odd fact, some modern pho chai recipes use toasted seaweed or even miso paste to boost the umami, mimicking the deep savoriness of beef bones without a single drop of animal fat. Purists argue about whether that's cheating, but honestly, you can't taste this and feel cheated. The woman takes another bite, her shoulders relaxing, and for the first time you notice something quiet about the way people eat vegetarian pho. There's no rush, no noisy slurping competitions, no arguments about authenticity. Just slow, mindful bites, as if the calmness of the broth seeps into the people eating it. The vendor glances at her pot, stirring gently, and you catch a fleeting expression on her face. Pride, but not loud or boastful. It's the quiet pride of someone who knows they've created comfort without needing excess. You crouch there, breathing in the soft, clean aroma, and you realize something simple but important. Pho doesn't have to be rich or meaty to be pho, because pho, at its heart, isn't just about beef or chicken. It's about warmth, about care, about taking the time to coax flavor from the simplest ingredients and turning them into something that feels like kindness in a bowl. The woman finishes her meal, placing her chopsticks neatly on the edge of the bowl, and whispers a soft, "Come on." The vendor nods with a small smile, and the steam curls upward, lighter than usual, almost like a blessing. And you can't help but think, as you watch it fade into the morning air, sometimes the gentlest bowls are the ones that stay with you the longest. The night settles in heavier now, the kind of darkness that makes the lantern light feel warmer than usual. But tonight, there's a strange tension in the air. Not from hunger, not from arguments over north or south, but from something older. You feel it before you hear it. A quiet murmur drifts between the tables, low and secretive, as if no one wants to say it too loudly. But you catch the words anyway, whispered just above the sound of the bubbling pot. That stall, the one that only opens at midnight. They say it's haunted. You shift slightly, curiosity sparking in your chest, because tonight isn't just about broth or noodles. Tonight you're about to step into one of the strangest chapters in Pho's long history, the ghost stories of Pho stalls. Here's your odd fact for tonight. In Hanoi, there are old tales of Pho vendors who cooked only at night, claiming the broth tasted better when the streets were quiet. But whispers grew. People said some of these stalls were different, that the vendors never aged, that their stalls appeared in one alley and vanished the next, leaving only the smell of star anise in the air. One story tells of a famous Pho stall near Hoan Kiem Lake. It only opened on foggy nights, run by a thin, silent man who never seemed to blink. Customers swore the broth was the richest they'd ever tasted, but when they returned the next day, the alley was empty, no trace of fire or pot. Another story, this one more unsettling, tells of a vendor who stirred her pot long after midnight, whispering to it as if talking to someone. A customer once asked who she was speaking to. She smiled faintly and said, "My husband. He's been helping me stir for years." The husband, of course, had been dead for a decade. You glance at the vendor in front of you now, stirring her pot methodically, and the steam rises thicker, swirling in ways that almost look human. You shake the thought away, but can't help staring a little longer than usual, wondering if some of these stories began just like this. Someone crouched too long by a pot, letting the night play tricks on their mind. And yet, there's something strangely comforting about these tales. People didn't fear these ghostly vendors. They admired them. The spirits, they said, stayed because they loved their craft too much to leave. Even in the afterlife, they couldn't stop perfecting their broth. A young boy sitting near you leans close to his grandmother, whispering, "Do you think the soup tastes better because of the ghosts?" She chuckles softly, patting his hand. Maybe, or maybe good pho just feels like magic when it's made with love. The steam curls higher, glowing softly in the lantern light, and you smile because, ghost or not, that's the truth, isn't it? A perfect bowl of pho already feels like it has something supernatural about it. The pot bubbles louder for a moment, almost like laughter, and you crouch there, your heart oddly calm, thinking, if there are ghosts in this broth, they're not here to scare anyone. They're just here to make sure the soup never loses its soul. The air tonight feels softer, quieter, almost heavy with emotion, and you sense it even before you see the faces. This isn't the lively chatter of locals or the curious buzz of first-time eaters. No, the people crouched at this little Pho stall wear different expressions, nostalgia, relief, something that trembles between happiness and homesickness. These are not locals. These are people who left home long ago. You notice them immediately. A middle-aged man with tired eyes. A young woman holding her phone like she's about to take a picture but can't bring herself to. An elderly couple sitting close together, their hands clasped as if they're afraid to let go. And when the first bowls arrive, the air changes. The man takes one sip, just one, and freezes. His chopsticks hover midair as his well up, and then, slowly, almost reluctantly, he exhales a shaky breath. Because this isn't just pho to them. It's home in a bowl. Here's your quiet fact for tonight. Vietnamese refugees and immigrants around the world often describe pho as the one food that brings them back instantly to their childhood. Even decades after leaving, the first taste can trigger memories so vivid they can smell the streets of Hanoi or hear the morning vendors of Saigon. The young woman finally takes her first slurp, and you see it. The smallest smile, half choked by tears. She presses her napkin to her eyes quickly, embarrassed, but no one here judges. Because everyone at this table understands. You watch as they eat slowly, reverently, as if afraid to finish too quickly. Each bite is careful, almost ceremonial, like they're trying to stretch the memory as long as they can. And the vendor, she notices too. Her usual brisk movements soften, and for once, she lingers near the table, not saying much, just watching quietly. She understands better than anyone what pho means to people who've been away too long. Another odd little secret. Some pho vendors abroad purposely cook their broth the old way, even when it costs more or takes longer, just so homesick customers can taste the exact flavor they remember. There are stories of Vietnamese Americans driving hours across states to find one stall rumored to taste like Hanoi in 1975. You crouch there, your chest tight, watching as the middle-aged man lowers his head slightly over his bowl, whispering something you can't hear. Maybe he's thanking the vendor. Maybe he's thanking the memory. Maybe both. The steam rises gently around them, curling like soft hands around their faces, and you realize something simple but profound. Pho isn't just about flavor, it's about belonging. Even thousands of miles away, even after years of being gone, a single bowl can remind you who you are, where you came from, and that somewhere once you were home. The man takes another careful sip, his eyes still wet, and you can almost hear his thoughts in the quiet of the night. I didn't know how much I missed this. Until now. The night feels restless, as if the air itself is curious about what comes next. You can sense it in the way people talk at the tables. Quieter now, not with nostalgia like before, but with a strange kind of excitement. Pho has traveled far, been to Paris and Los Angeles, survived instant noodles and celebrity endorsements. But tonight, you hear a different kind of conversation. What will Pho become next? A young man at a nearby table, dressed in sleek modern clothes, leans forward over his steaming bowl. In 50 years, he says, his voice full of certainty, Pho will be in space. Astronauts will drink it from packets. His friends laugh, but one of them shrugs, nodding as if it's not that crazy. And honestly, maybe it isn't. Here's your curious fact for tonight. Food scientists have already experimented with freeze-dried pho for long-distance flights. Some even predict pho will one day be served in orbital research stations because its broth is easy to dehydrate and its flavors, beef, star anise, ginger, hold up surprisingly well when rehydrated. But it's not just space travel. The future of pho on Earth feels just as wild. One woman at the next table flips through a glossy magazine, pointing at an article. They're making plant-based pho now, she says, showing pictures of shimmering golden broth made entirely from roasted vegetables and mushroom stock, and lab-grown beef slices. No cows at all. A man sitting beside her frowns, clearly unconvinced. That's not pho. Pho without real beef. Times change, she replies simply, sipping her bowl. And she's not wrong. Around the world, chefs are already experimenting with pho in ways no one could have imagined a century ago. Pho made with lobster, pho infused with truffles, pho frozen into popsicles for modern gastronomy restaurants. Most of it sounds absurd, but some of it works. You crouch there smiling because you understand something they're just starting to realize. Pho isn't fragile, it's been through wars, rationing, exile, and instant noodles. It will survive truffle oil. They will survive lab-grown beef. The vendor nearby stirs her pot the same way her mother probably did decades ago, completely uninterested in the future these people are imagining. But you glance at the young customers, at their bright eyes as they argue about robots cooking pho one day, and you can feel it. Pho will change, yes, but it will also stay exactly what it's always been. Hot broth, soft noodles, a quiet kind of comfort. Because no matter how fancy or futuristic it becomes, no matter if it's served by a street vendor or eaten through a space helmet, people will still slurp it the same way, still close their eyes at that first sip, still feel that familiar warmth spreading through their chest. The young man laughs, pretending to sip imaginary pho from a silver astronaut pouch. His friends laugh too, and the sound blends with the soft bubbling of the vendor's clay pot. And you crouch there, letting the steam wrap around you, knowing the truth they're only guessing at. Pho doesn't need to worry about the future. Because as long as people need comfort, pho will always be there to give it. The night feels warmer now, not because of the air, but because of the way the stall glows under the lantern light. There's a hush that falls over the crowd, quiet references if everyone here knows they're about to witness something special. Not something new, not something experimental. No, tonight is about perfection. Because this is the bowl. You can feel it before you even see it. The vendor moves differently now. Slower, almost ceremonial, as if she understands that this bowl isn't just for eating, it's for remembering. She ladles the broth carefully, letting it pour in a smooth, golden stream. No splashes, no wasted drops. The aroma rises immediately, thick and layered, each note distinct but perfectly blended. You close your eyes and it's all there. Sweet marrow, smoky charred onion, the warm licorice of star anise, the faint floral whisper of cinnamon. This is the kind of broth that has been watched for hours, skimmed obsessively, coaxed into harmony like a song finally hitting its perfect pitch. Here's a secret only obsessive pho lovers know. A perfect bowl isn't just about flavor, it's about balance. Too much spice and the beef disappears. Too much beef and the spices drown. This vendor knows that dance. Every step of it. The noodles follow, freshly cut, white and soft, folding into the bowl like clouds sinking into a sunset. They don't clump, don't stick, just slide gently under the ladle's weight, soaking up the broth with quiet gratitude. The beef slices, oh, the beef, are paper thin, so delicate they curl at the edges the moment they touch the hot broth. You watch them change color from soft pink to warm brown in a slow, hypnotic bloom. Then come the finishing touches. A sprinkle of green onions cut so fine they float like confetti. A few rings of white onion barely softened by the rising steam. And just at the last second, a light dusting of black pepper that smells faintly like wood smoke. No unnecessary toppings, no showy garnishes. This isn't the southern feast of herbs or the bold experiments of modern fusion pho. This is restraint perfected, the purest version of what pho was always meant to be. The customer who receives it doesn't speak. He simply bows his head slightly, takes his first sip of broth and closes his eyes. His shoulders drop as if the heat has melted all the tension from his body. And you, still crouched, still breathing it in, feel something almost spiritual. Because you know without tasting it, that this bowl is the culmination of everything you've watched. The tough beginnings, the war years, the clay pots, the experiments, the arguments over names and sauces. Every mistake, every risk, every hour of sleepless stirring led here to this exact moment. The vendor doesn't smile, doesn't need to. She knows what she's done. And for a second, as the steam curls upward, you swear the broth itself seems proud. You're leaning closer, letting the aroma fill your chest, and you think, this isn't just pho anymore. This is memory, history, comfort, and love, all in one perfect bowl. The night is almost gone now, the lanterns dimming, the street quieter than it has been in hours. The last customers finish their bowls in silence, their faces soft and content, as if they know they've just witnessed something they'll carry with them long after they leave. The vendor wipes down her pot slowly, her movements unhurried, like someone saying goodbye to an old friend after a long shared journey. And you stay crouched, your knees stiff, but you can't leave yet. Not now. Not when everything feels so calm, so full, like the world itself is taking a deep, satisfied breath. The steam rises slower now, curling in lazy ribbons that fade into the cool night air. It feels gentler, softer, as if even the broth knows it's time to rest. You breathe it in one last time, and every scent tells a story. The smoky onion of Hanoi alleys, the sweet southern herbs of Saigon mornings, the faint memory of clay pots, ration years, and bowls shared by homesick souls across oceans. This is it, the end of the journey. You glance at the vendor, and for the first time, she looks up. Not at you, but at the pot, her expression quiet and almost tender. There's no pride in her face, no triumph, just the contentment of someone who has done exactly what they were meant to do. A young boy, the last customer, lifts his bowl and drinks the final drop of broth. He wipes his mouth, grinning, and whispers softly, "Come on," before slipping away into the night. The vendor nods once, a small acknowledgement, and covers her pot. The fire beneath it fades, glowing faintly like an ember refusing to die out completely, and you feel something shift in your chest, a warmth that isn't just hunger or comfort, but something deeper. Because this isn't just a story about soup, it's a story about people who kept stirring their pots no matter what, who turned scraps into survival, survival into art, and art into something so simple yet so profound, it can make grown men cry at their first sip after years away from home. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of the street fade away. Somewhere in some other city, another pot is already bubbling, maybe in a tiny Paris kitchen, maybe in a California diner, maybe years from now in a space station orbiting the Earth. It doesn't matter where, because the feeling will be the same. The warmth, the memory, the quiet comfort of a single perfect bowl. The steam thins, drifting higher into the night, dissolving like the last page of a book. And as the lanterns flicker out one by one, you feel your own breathing slow, heavy, calm, as if the story itself is tucking you in. The pot is silent now. The street is empty, but in your chest, the warmth lingers, and as your eyes grow heavy, you hear it. Just a whisper, soft as steam fading into the air. Good night, eat well, and don't forget me. End of script. Sweet dreams.